Jasmeen Kaur was born on September 14, 1999, in India and was the first child of a woman named Rajpul Kaur. It should be clarified that the word Kaur means princess. Kaur is often used as a middle name, but for the heroines of today's story, it was a surname. It is known that Rajpul gave birth to twin sons Gurman and Sukmo after Jasmeen. The children's father died when the girl was only 6 years old, and the family took this loss hard. In 2017, 18-year-old Jasmeen decided to go to Australia in search of new opportunities. She knew her relatives lived there. Uncle Sam Bordua, who lived in Adelaide with his wife Ramondi and their daughter, welcomed his niece, and Jasmeen settled with them. The girl, drawn to medicine and the desire to help people, set out to study in South Australia. After passing the exams, she enrolled as a nurse. To somehow help the family that hosted her, Jasmeen volunteered to cook for them, and it should be noted that she mastered this task perfectly. But that wasn't all. Her aunt and cousin admired her ability to dress tastefully, which she politely taught her relatives. Additionally, Jasmeen proved to be a talented fashion connoisseur and readily shared her knowledge. Despite her young age, she established herself as a reliable, responsible, and conscientious young woman. The excellent upbringing and education her parents gave her complemented Jasmeen's kindness, making her a role model for those around her. The girl was very attached to her mother and missed her a lot, calling her and other close relatives every day to tell them how she lived and what she did. Before starting her medical studies, Jasmeen decided to gain practical experience by working in a nursing home in a suburb of Adelaide. It is believed that her fate crossed with Singh there. Tarikjot was born in 1999 in a village in the Indian state of Punjab and was the firstborn of his parents. After some time, the second child, Singh, was born. The children's father worked as a farmer on a small plot of land where the family lived. The mother managed the household and took care of the children. Tarikjot's childhood was bleak and hopeless. The house always had a bad atmosphere because Singh was excessively cruel, preferring to resolve conflicts with violence, and his sons grew up in fear of their own father. Mama was a kind of refuge for them. She knew how to calm and comfort them. Additionally, the brothers loved their maternal grandparents very much, where they always felt safe. Tarikjot's mother noticed the boy's immense kindness and sincerity. His mere presence lifted everyone's spirits. At school, he also proved to be an exemplary student, striving for new knowledge. When it was time for him to decide on further education, as is customary in India, he proved to everyone with top grades that he was on the right path and had a promising career ahead of him. In 2016, when Tarikjot graduated from school, his grandparents managed to gather a small amount for their grandson and helped him move to Australia. The guy had long been drawn to Australia, and he finally got the wonderful opportunity to live in charming Adelaide. Like many young people at the time, he successfully passed the standard English test, a prerequisite for admission to the University of South Australia, and was accepted as a student. Tarikjot had many directions and research fields open to him. After some consideration, he decided on information technology and aimed for a bachelor's degree. At the same time, he had to work to support himself. For Tarikjot, this was no problem. He tried various places, most of which were related to elderly care. Colleagues loved and respected him, and employers appreciated his honesty and kindness, certainly leaving positive reviews and recommendations for Tarikjot. He continued to work hard, and it soon became clear that compassion and helping the disadvantaged and unfortunate were his true calling. Over time, Tarikjot's situation improved. He saved some money and moved into a separate apartment in a suburb of the city, where he lived with another young man, with whom he quickly became friends. When Tarikjot and Jasmeen first met in 2018, the latter had already achieved considerable success in her profession. Colleagues praised her boundless dedication and optimism. The employer was thrilled with this sweet, kind-hearted girl. It's no surprise that Tarikjot, who was loved for the same qualities, quickly became close to Jasmeen. As they communicated at work and participated in group events together, they began to become friends. Soon, their business relationship developed into a romantic one. And by April 2020, they were already a couple in love. Tarikjot never hid his true intentions, now openly declaring that he saw Jasmeen as the one with whom he wanted to build a life and a strong family. However, over time, he developed a certain insecurity. Tarikjot began to doubt Jasmeen's actions and motives. Jealousy gripped him, and he began demanding detailed reports from her on where she was and with whom she communicated. The guy tried to control her every step, and if she planned to meet friends after work. He immediately became angry. Constant calls and unfair accusations became part of his behavior. One day, the young man demanded that Jasmeen leave her friends and come home immediately. For the girl, such a life became unbearable. She couldn't stand it and shared her experiences with her mother. When her mother heard about the total control from her daughter's boyfriend, she naturally disapproved of the relationship. Tarikjot didn't care about the interference of others. He was completely absorbed in his own world, wanting to be sure that his beloved would be with him all his life. In October 2020, Tarikjot bought engagement rings and proposed to Jasmeen. Despite their disagreements and ignoring obvious signs, the girl agreed to become his wife. The engagement didn't calm Tarikjot but only increased his suspicions. Now, he used every free minute to appear at Jasmeen's workplace unannounced, always with the goal of keeping an eye on her. After experiencing the euphoria triggered by the engagement, the girl began to reconsider the groom's behavior. Doubts overwhelmed her, and the thought of ending the relationship increasingly occupied Jasmeen's mind. Eventually, she realized that the connection with Tarikjot had negative effects on her mental and emotional health. After careful consideration on January 4, 2021, she told him that they should break up. In response, she heard angry threats and words from the man that he would take his own life if she left him. The next day, when Jasmeen finished work, she noticed from the window that Tarikjot was watching her. During a break, she went out to talk to him, and the guy once again begged her to stay, but she remained steadfast in her decision. Then, Tarikjot once again threatened to harm himself, saying that she would be responsible for whatever happened to him. That same evening, Jasmeen learned that Tarikjot had taken a large number of sleeping pills. She never took his words seriously and didn't believe he was capable of it. Worried, the girl urgently contacted his roommate. A friend came and took Tarikjot to the hospital, where he wrote a statement claiming he had tried to take his own life but took no responsibility for the decision. He blamed Jasmeen's family for the breakup and suggested that her relatives had influenced her decision to leave him. The next morning, on January 6, 2021, a psychiatrist examined the man. The specialist found no signs of mental illness in the patient and concluded that the overdose was most likely due to the inability to cope with the breakup. Tarikjot was discharged, but only a few hours later, Jasmeen's ex-fiancé suddenly appeared at her place, insisting that she go with him to talk about something important. His real goal was to persuade the girl to resume the relationship. This attempt failed again as Jasmeen refused. The guy was very angry and wanted her to pay for his suffering. In a desperate attempt to win back his beloved, he threatened to make their intimate videos public. Tarikjot knew exactly that this would be unbearable for Jasmeen's devout family. The trick didn't have the desired effect, and in the face of the girl's indifference, Tarikjot sent the video to her mother. A few minutes later, Rajpul, shocked, contacted her daughter, who was understandably also furious about the whole situation. The next day, the jealous man came to Jasmeen's workplace. He stood next to his car, patiently waiting for her to finish her shift. Although the girl ignored him and simply walked away, he didn't give up. This time, Tarikjot slowly followed her in his car, then suddenly gave up the chase, allowing her to reach home unhindered. However, the mentally exhausted Jasmeen couldn't sleep properly that night. The pressure from Tarikjot increased day by day, and each time he threatened to share the intimate videos with more people if Jasmeen didn't come back to him immediately. January 28, 2021, became critical for the girl. Unable to bear it any longer, she officially reported her ex-fiancé for harassment to the police. Every detail of their relationship was recorded from beginning to end. Due to the severity of the matter, police officers launched an investigation and met with Tarikjot on February 9 to clarify what had happened. The man received a warning for his unacceptable behavior. It is noteworthy that by this time, Tarikjot had already developed a habit of writing text messages containing insults and bullying. Although most of these messages were never sent to Jasmeen, they clearly showed the extent of his obsession. A few days later, the young man again tried to take his own life but was timely discovered by his roommate. When asked in the hospital why he did such a thing, Tarikjot said he couldn't survive the breakup and begged not to be admitted to the hospital. Amazingly, they listened to him and released him under medical supervision. A few days later, the man began taking medication prescribed by doctors because he was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and restlessness. However, at the same time, thoughts about harming Jasmeen became more intrusive. With careful concentration, Tarikjot began to develop his terrible plan. On March 4, 2021, he managed to get a map showing the locations of almost all surveillance cameras in Adelaide. The next day, he inserted his SIM card into another phone and left it at home to create an alibi. To avoid being filmed by cameras or noticed by acquaintances, the man also borrowed his neighbor's car, a blue Jeep. That same day, Tarikjot bought gloves, cable ties, tape, and a shovel at a hardware store. The only thing he didn't account for was that every move he made was recorded by the store's surveillance cameras. He then drove to Jasmeen's workplace, where he waited for her to come out. Around 10 p.m., the girl finished her work and walked out onto the deserted street, completely unaware of what awaited her. Suddenly, Tarikjot attacked her, grabbed her by the arms, and dragged her into the car. In the car, he taped Jasmeen's mouth and eyes shut, tied her hands and feet, drove to a remote location, and carried his ex-fiancée into the trunk of the car. He then drove north toward the city of Hawker, nearly 400 kilometers from Adelaide. Between 11:30 p.m. and 3:30 a.m., 5 city surveillance cameras recorded the car he was driving several times along the entire route. When Tarikjot arrived at a location only he knew, he got out of the car and began digging a shallow grave by the roadside. He then opened the trunk and tried to stab Jasmeen in the throat but couldn't cause significant damage. Unable to finish what he started, he let the girl sink into the grave and began to bury her alive. All this happened on the morning of March 6. After burying the grave, Tarikjot got into the car, drove off, and discarded Jasmeen's belongings along with the remaining cable ties, tape, and other items, including the gloves and balaclava. The place where he disposed of the evidence was known as Death Rock. When her family noticed that Jasmeen had not returned home that same day, they began to worry. When the girl didn't show up for work, the employer also became concerned. Their anxiety increased when they found out that the employee's car was still parked in front of the building. Knowing nothing about Jasmeen's whereabouts, her relatives contacted the authorities and reported her disappearance. For Detective Bray, who was in charge of the investigation, it was unlikely that the girl had gone somewhere alone or willingly with someone. He was sure she had been taken by force. Bray reviewed the security footage from Jasmeen's workplace, believing they would provide a clue. One of the recordings from the previous night showed a particular person. The man loitered near the building and then drove to Hawker for most of the morning. To clearly identify the suspect, the authorities made a public appeal to anyone who might have information about a young man in his early 20s who had been in contact with Jasmeen or had been near her in the days leading up to her disappearance. Unfortunately, no one responded. On March 7, investigators came to Tarikjot to talk to him, as a harassment report had previously been filed with the police. Initially, the man denied any involvement in the girl's disappearance. However, he later told the investigator that he and Jasmeen had argued, and she had allegedly tried to take her own life. According to Tarikjot, he decided, after the bride lost consciousness, that she had died and buried her in a remote location. The next day, the prisoner himself led the police to this horrific grave. When the police dug up Jasmeen's body, which was covered with a 30 centimeters layer of sand, they found that her hands were tied behind her back, her legs were tied with a cable, and her eyes and mouth were sealed with tape. The victim's throat was cut, but the wounds were obviously superficial. The body was sent for forensic examination, and a criminal case was immediately opened against Tarikjot. The young man was charged with failing to report the girl's death. This charge deprived him of the right to leave his residence. During a more detailed interrogation, serious discrepancies in Tarikjot's testimony emerged, leading to his arrest. The autopsy report confirmed that Jasmeen was still alive at the time of her burial, and the cause of death was lack of air. These findings ultimately shed light on the horrific nature of the events. On March 8, 2021, Tarikjot was charged with murder and placed in a pre-trial detention cell. The man insisted on his innocence, but bail was denied. A few days later, a passerby found Jasmeen's belongings near Death Rock. Prosecutors requested a delay of at least 9 months to prepare for the trial against the suspected perpetrator. His first appearance before the Supreme Court was scheduled for March 2022, but Tarikjot fell ill and tested positive for COVID. Instead of the suspect, his lawyer Martin Anders appeared at the hearing, declaring his client not guilty and actively defending him. The trial was postponed. It wasn't until February 6, 2023, that Tarikjot admitted his guilt before the Supreme Court of Adelaide. He openly stated that he had kidnapped Jasmeen with the intent to take her life. The man's confession spared the grieving family the ordeal of a lengthy trial, during which very painful issues would have surfaced. At the same time, a sincere confession guaranteed the perpetrator a slightly milder sentence. 5 months later, on July 5, 2023, a judge at the Supreme Court of South Australia sentenced Tarikjot to life imprisonment. In a final attempt to reduce the sentence, the lawyer emphasized the significant impact the breakup had on his client, pointing to Tarikjot's alleged psychological problems. However, The judge gave no chance to the defense, citing Tarikjot's careful planning of all the details of the crime and the calmness with which he executed his horrific act. The sentencing hearing took place on August 1, 2023. After considering various factors such as age, psychological issues, and background, the judge concluded that the non-parole period should exceed 20 years. Tarikjot was sentenced to life imprisonment and would be eligible for parole after 22 years and 10 months. Meaning he would be eligible for parole in 2044. In the event of his release, Tarikjot would have to leave the country. Before concluding the hearing, the judge explained to Tarikjot what his actions meant. He pointed out that as Tarikjot took Jasmeen's life, he was aware of the monstrosity of his actions and therefore took steps to cover his tracks. He traveled far from the place where he kidnapped the girl to the place where he buried her alive. While driving, he had enough time to reconsider his plan and abandon it. But he decided to proceed. For this reason, the criminal must be behind bars to be held accountable for his heinous act. Rajpul was satisfied with the verdict but said she would never be happy again because she wanted more than anything in the world to be close to her daughter. The inconsolable mother also added that she missed talking to Jasmeen every day and continued to wish her a good night every evening, as she had done for almost 20 years. She noted that justice had prevailed and brought her relief. But it was hard to understand that a criminal could be released in just 22 years while she and her family would spend the rest of their lives without their sweet Jasmeen. Relatives and friends of the deceased decided to create a unique place in their home to commemorate the girl, never to forget her pure soul and kind heart.